Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to highlights from the 4th round of the Multi-Class Endurance Championship Season 5. Round 4 took place on Atomic Tire International, which was a PC community track from Season 4. It has a lot of hairpins and a banking as it winds its way around the airport, although you would be forgiven for forgetting that that's where the track is based. This is easily the shortest track on the calendar, so GT1 drivers would be clocking 69 laps around here, although GT2 and GT3 much less due to the big pace differences between the top cars and the others this round. Managing traffic was certainly a big factor during all of the races that we'll see in this video. GT1 drivers for this race were in the Schafter V12, which makes this only the second race in MCEC history to be an actual multi-class race, because the Schafter V12 is technically in the sports class but can be used in sedan races as well, with GT2 drivers in the Fugitive and GT3 drivers in the Asea. If you want to watch live coverage of all the races either before or after you've watched this video roundup, check the description or pinned comment for videos that do just that, and for all the information you need about the championship including past seasons, full calendar, rules and regulations and more, check the description and pinned comment for all the links that you may need. So, as always, we start with the PS4 GT1 battle, and it wasn't much of a battle for the win because Ryan W1, who was our winner from the first three rounds of the championship, followed it up with make it 4 out of 4 wins by starting from second place, getting a good start, getting into the lead by the first couple of corners, and basically driving away relatively uncontested. Whereas behind, as you're seeing on the screen from other perspectives, it's not quite as straightforward as that, and people are having certainly some significant issues. What I want to just point out at the moment, before I get into explaining how the other podium positions were sorted out, is JJ Canex in the top left hand corner of the screen. He had a very good race. Obviously he was in second place for quite a while, starting on pole position, but then gets caught up with a few GT3s as the GT1s caught up to the GT3s in this race, and on sort of lap 4 or 5 it was really that quick because of this huge pace difference. But he had a really good race. He actually had the third best lap of anyone in GT1, but just by the end of the race really struggled and capitulated basically and finished last, which is the same position that he's finished in all the races so far since he was drafted in as a replacement early on in the season. So I just wanted to highlight that he had a really good race, and it's a bit of a shame that he wasn't able to have a result that reflected the race that he had, but he's doing very well to keep in there and keep going, because really he was a GT2 reserve and there weren't any other GT1 reserves that could have gotten the position. So he's doing very well, and hopefully he can get a better result later. As we've just seen, we saw young Bright Hawk work his way up to third place, and then it was a case of him and Flaming fighting it out over second and third positions. Flaming was obviously in the defensive position in the situation, and young Bright Hawk was trying to get that position back. They had a pretty good battle for a fair number of laps, and in the end young Bright Hawk was able to get the position and secure second place in the race, with Flaming Gun finishing in third place overall. So yeah, it was pretty standard, I guess you could say, for the PS4 GT1 in terms of the finishing positions. GT2 was certainly the same story in terms of first place finisher, because GT Driver, who's won 2 of the 3 races so far, as you can see from the top left, was starting in pole position. He gets a good start, and as battles are going on behind, we can see a little bit of argy-bargy in the bottom screens there, and Sherritt unfortunately gets knocked off the side of the banking there and has to work his way around. As I'm obviously trying to battle AG 25-2014 over second place, all of these battles start happening further down the pack, and GT Driver is basically able to drive away and get an uncontested victory, essentially just like what Ryan W1 did in GT1. So myself and AG were battling fairly well over the first couple of laps. We had a pretty decent gap to the rest of the pack. We weren't sort of slowing each other down as much as they probably were, I was actually on the attack and getting some decent overtakes, and then I would make a mistake and give the position back, and then make another overtake to get the position back again. So we were having a really good battle over second place. Everybody's pace in this race was fairly similar, and pretty much that's the standard way of PS4 GT2 these days. It seems like there's only about ever a second per lap difference from top to bottom, so it's always very close. But yeah, we had a really good battle over second place, trying to defend and overtake, and it was really fun to be part of that battle. Now, after all of this had happened, AG comes into the pits, obviously deciding that he wanted to get some clean air and maybe try to put in some lap times, which he actually manages to do. He was a little bit quicker than me during that middle phase of the race, and I left my pit stops until later on in the race. So I was in second place for quite a while, but AG was certainly, never too far away once all of the pit stops had sort of filtered out. So yeah, basically what happens is that during the middle portion of the race, I guess I wasn't really feeling all that comfortable, just being on my own, driving to my own pace. It didn't really work that well for me, and I guess I started to basically just lose time, and I wasn't as quick. So when AG does come in and make his stop, he's able to put in some quicker lap times, and by the time I come and make my stop later on in the race, he's overtaken me for position, and I do almost drop behind AG Axel to drop into fourth place. So I came out in third place, when all the pit stops had sort of filtered out, at least the first pit stops, and I then set about trying to catch up to AG and also try to consolidate third place, which I do. I actually drive away from AG Axel, and I'm able to bring the gap to AG down from about 8 seconds to 2, but then I make a horrendous error with having a bit of trouble overtaking the GT3, and I lose so much time. At this point, I think AG Axel and TS Nobody, who were in 4th and 5th places behind, had done their second pit stops, so by the time I came out to make my second pit stop, I actually dropped behind AG Axel and almost dropped behind TS Nobody into 5th place as well. So I came out in 4th place, and I was really hard on myself. It's not pleasant to watch if you watch the live coverage. We're coming on to the final lap of the race now, and I was sort of quite angry with myself during all of this. So I've got some sort of fire within me to try and push on. I wasn't expecting to actually catch up all that distance again, and you can see maybe Ajax has a bit of damage to the car or something, because I'm able to catch up, and we have basically a side-by-side battle all the way through the final lap of the race over the final podium spot. But after I made that mistake, I was chasing down second place after having a good race up until then, and there was so much sort of self-loathing and hate of myself, and I think it's just because the MCEC becomes so, it takes over my life when it comes to the videos and the organization of the entire event, that it every single stream I'm doing is about the MCEC, and if I don't do well, or I was doing well and then mess it up, it really gets to me, and it certainly did here. So I guess looking back on it now, I managed to get third place back on the final lap of the race, which I should be happy about. At the time I wasn't. At the time I was still annoyed with myself for the mistake that I'd made. But I'm given the lap times after the race, and I certainly wasn't one of the quickest guys in the race, that a third place and a podium actually was pretty good in the end. But AG also, shout out to him for getting his first podium of the season in second place. He had a very good race, and obviously GT Driver is still at the top doing his thing that he's been doing for 3 out of the 4 races this season. Now coming on to the GT3 battle, we've basically got massive battles in the early stages of the race with multiple lead changes and great racing all the way through. It did get a little bit dicey when the GT1s came around the first time, and this was what I was talking about with the sort of pace difference between the GT1s and the GT3s. It was so huge that I think the GT1s lapped the GT2s about 8 or 9 times, and the GT3s more than 10 times, possibly something like that anyway. And it was just such a huge pace difference that basically every couple of laps you'd be seeing a GT1 driver coming past you as a GT3 or GT2 or GT3. So that had to be managed, and that was part of the race certainly as well. We had a good battle going on over the lead for the first couple of laps, as we're seeing here. Horst, Demo and Obst trying to go for the lead. It was, there was one moment where there was an amazing 5-way battle going over the lead as well that we have a spectator shot for, which you'll see. And it was just a kind of looking back on it, seeing the footage and seeing what these GT3 cars were all dealing with. This is, what we're seeing now is over the lead of the race, and it's kind of crazy. But I guess eventually, to sort of break it down into exactly what happened, Shady Fruit, who was the winner of 2 out of the 3 rounds so far, he was in 5th place in this 5-way battle that we're about to see, and the guys in front of him all either make pit stops or have a few crashes or have a few issues that he ends up in the lead of the race. So what he does is basically not come in for his pit stop and is able to put in the laps. He just stays out for a longer time, put in some quick lap times, and by the time he makes his pit stops, he was able to come out in front. So we are going to see it from his perspective, a few comings together from a fair few people, and then other people coming into the pits as well, basically giving him free air in front. Now obviously you've still got to manage all the GT1 drivers and GT2 drivers coming around, but he was able to do that effectively, and he was just basically being quicker than all of his competitors in GT3, that he didn't need to make a pit stop, and once he eventually did make his stops, he came out ahead of everybody else. So there was actually a really interesting battle between Happy Gista and Horst Demo over 3rd place. This is how close it finished between those two, and Diglett took the other podium spot in 2nd place. So as we see the Drivers' Championships and the Teams' Championship tables, in the halfway point of the season, Ryan W1 has a full point score at the moment. GT Driver is only 3 points away from a full point score. There are dropped rounds that are taken into account by the time we get to the end of the season as well, so keep that in mind. You can basically drop your lowest scoring round out of your 8, so it's only the best 7 that count. It's very close at the top for GT3 with Shady Fruit and Diglett. And in terms of the Teams' Championship, Pressivex are leading the way with 110 points, but only 8 points ahead of Richards Majestic. And really the top 5 in the PS4 Teams Championship have a chance of winning. So moving on to the Xbox One race, first of all with GT1, we had an interesting, again it was kind of similar to what we saw from PS4 GT3, where there's just so many people battling and changing positions. It wasn't over the lead, but it was certainly over 2nd place for most of the time. In the early stages of the race, there was an early battle between Trumpet Master and All That Design. Trumpet was able to basically stay the most consistent during that time period and got into an early lead, as various other GT1s got caught out in traffic and other incidents that we'll see, including King Blaze, the winner of all 3 rounds so far. He got involved in a crash with R2XDJ and ended up right at the back of the field, and basically he came in for an early pit stop, which sent him obviously even further to the back of the field. So we had Blaze, who'd done 1 pit stop and a crash, ended up right at the back of the field, and we had Trumpet Master at the front, who'd got a decent lead really after a good battle with All That Design in the early stages. He manages to get into the lead and keep the lead for quite a while, as Design gets caught up with some slower cars, and then gets caught up with the battle basically over 2nd place that a lot of GT1 drivers were all in. It was basically a 5-6 way fight at the back end of GT1, all over 2nd place, with Blaze at the back of all that and Trumpet Master a little bit ahead at the front with a decent gap. So the way that it all kind of shook out, because we had design, all that design disconnected, as well as R2X DJ as well. So there was basically Edible Hornet, who has done really well, to be fair, in the last few rounds, considering he was a late replacement for a GT1, very similar to JJ Canex on the PS4 side. And Edible Hornet and R2X DJ gave us a great battle, just like they've done sort of every single round in GT1 Xbox One so far. But Edible Hornet eventually gets the better of these guys and gets up into third place, and then all that design and R2X DJ disconnect. Edible Hornet makes an early pit stop, comes out behind Blaze. So we've got basically the top three being Edible Hornet and Blaze, who are in the back of the pack, and Trumpet Master, who is at the front leading the way. The sort of mid-pack weren't really going to feature. So it was all going to be about, much later on into the race, about an hour into the race, it was all about who would come out first between Trumpet Master and Blaze, because Blaze was, at that point, after everybody else had made a pit stop as well, Blaze was in second place. And it was about Trumpet Master's final pit stop. All the pit stops had been shaken out. Trumpet Master was basically the last one to make a pit. And this is how close it was when they absolutely unbelievable. Trumpet Master had been in the lead all the way through. Blaze had been in last place and was fighting his way back through. And that was how close it was when the pit stops filtered out, an hour into the race. So there was only half an hour to go. And what ends up happening really is that Blaze is pushing too much and starts making small mistakes, gets caught up with a few GT3 drivers, and then that means that he loses a bit of time to Trumpet Master and has to push even harder to try and catch up. And then that leads to basically the big mistake that sort of ends it, where he goes a little bit too far down off the banking and flips the car. That gives Edible Hornet, who was never too far away from this lead battle, second place, and Blaze has enough damage on the car that really he has to just bring it home and try to secure the podium spot. So Trumpet Master takes his first win of the season, first person to win in GT1 that isn't King Blaze. Edible Hornet gets a great second place again, and Blaze does manage to bring it home, which, to be fair, is a pretty good recovery considering he was in last place at the very start of the race. So in GT2, Charlie Addo got into an early lead, as we'll see. We'll see how that happens, and didn't look back from that point on. It seems like that's the case, obviously, in round 2 of the championship. Charlie didn't have a very good race, but still had the best lap. But if he is allowed to be in the front of the pack, he will drive away, because he generally seems to be the quickest in terms of at least 1 lap pace. So it wasn't quite as easy as I've made out. We're going to see the battling on the screen from quite a few perspectives. It was sort of a move that he had to do as other people were fighting in the early stages. We've got G-Ross, Faruja, Elton 1978 and Matty all in this battle, with Blue Eyed Malice as well just ahead. And then in first place we also have Jetta Arts, who led from pole position. So behind the top two, these are all fighting it out, changing positions all the time on the first couple of laps, which again, classic GT2. Seems like GT2 is just one of the best for entertainment perspectives in terms of the racing that goes on. And I mean, you can see it right here, so many changes of position, so many people all fighting over what is second place in the race at the moment. And it was great to see from an outside perspective as we were watching this live. Again, if you want to see any of these races as they were done live, we're spectating from the sidelines and all that kind of stuff, with multiple perspectives up at the same time as we're watching people's live streams. It was just a really good race, and all of them really are. They're just good fun to spectate over. So this is where it all sort of comes to a head in GT2. We essentially have the group of G-Ross, Charlie Addo and Faruja get away from the rest of the pack and chase down Jetta, who's been the long-time leader from the start. And Charlie Ado gets round the outside of a few and then gets around the outside of Jetta as well, so takes the better line around the banking, is able to get up the inside for the next corner, and that's how Charlie gets the lead. And then as these other three start fighting between themselves, he is able to drive away. And one of the main reasons for that is, as we're seeing here, Jetta makes a slight mistake in coming onto the start-finish straight, and G-Ross is able to get alongside. But then they have a coming together coming into the first corner. Ferrugia gets involved in that as well, and that basically, stops any chance of anybody else chasing down Charlie because everybody's lost so much time. G-Ross does end up recovering to overtake Ferrugia to get back into what is fourth place at that point, because we've got L1978, as you can see there, just behind Jetta in third place, having one of his best races. And then L actually even gets up into second place, as we can see here. So that, again, good battles going on with about 5 different people all switching positions in GT2. And yeah, really good race from L, actually. Very, certainly a better race, the best race that we've seen from him throughout the course of the season. But unfortunately, after getting into second place, makes a bit of a mistake, and that allows G-Ross to get up into third. He then tries to chase down Jetta, which is kind of broken up by pit stops, but in the end it doesn't matter. I believe he'd already done enough to get that second place, but Jetta ends up disconnecting from one of his best races as well, but he would have gotten a penalty for that first corner incident anyway. So Charlie Ado ends up taking the victory, with G-Ross coming home in second place, and L1978, again, like I said, having one of his best races to get his first podium of the season. Xbox One GT3 now. And this one was basically dominated by different pit stop strategies, and it was really interesting to watch from the sidelines as a spectator as we were commentating over it, because what ended up happening is that Major Copyright, as we'll see, has a few issues in the first couple of laps and loses a lot of time. So he decides to make some early pit stops, and that's kind of, as we're seeing a nice shot here of, this is kind of one of the best things about this track, is that you can stand in the middle and you can see all sorts of different parts of the track and different cars as they wind their way around. But yeah, Copyright has a few issues getting caught up with other drivers and just making a few mistakes. So he comes in and makes an early pit stop, and then later on, obviously, he makes another early pit stop as well. So quite early into the race, he's done his 2 mandatory pit stops. Then we had a group that were all fighting over essentially second place, who'd all done 1 pit stop. I think Copyright was in 5th place after having made both of his pit stops. Then we had 2nd to 4th places of Recited, Tom22 and Bar 27, all on 1 pit stop fighting over 2nd place. And then RJ Slow, who manages to get the lead from Recited and has a good battle with Recited early on in the race, and then gets caught out and has to catch up again, as we'll see the battle as that unfolds. He was in the lead of the race after he took it from Recited, having done no pit stops. So it was really interesting that we had these 3 separate groups, and the pit lane on this track was so long that it became really interesting. We didn't really know where anybody was going to filter out and who was going to ultimately end up winning the race, because I think RJ Slow was maybe 45 seconds ahead, but he hadn't taken both of his pit stops, and that's about 40 seconds to do 2 pit stops. So yeah, it was really, really entertaining. We'll see a spectator shot from the battle over that second place with Recited, Bar 27 and Tom 22 as well. They were really close quite a lot of the way through the race. And ultimately, as it worked out, RJ Slow had done enough when he came in to make both of his pit stops quite late on in the race. He came out ahead of all of the other GT3s to take the victory. Major Copyright, who had basically done the opposite strategy and done his 2 pit stops early, when Recited, Bar 22 and Bar 27 and Tom 22 came in to make their final pit stop, he was able to pass them. So Major Copyright finished in second place, and in the end it was Bar 27 who got the best of that mid-pack to take his first podium of the season. And it was really close between Tom 22 and Recited as well, over 4th and 5th, as we see there. So it was a really entertaining battle for the most part in the GT3 field on Xbox One. When it comes to the championship, we've got Blaze still at the top despite his little hiccup in this round. G-Ross is only narrowly ahead of Charlie Addo in the GT2 championship. Those two look to be the ones who are going to fight it out over the top 2 positions. And then for the GT3 championship, we've got Major Copyright and RJ Slow. Looks like it's going to be those two fighting it out over the championship as well when we get to the end of the season. With Globe Oil and Ron, the two oil companies that are in the MCEC this season, only 1 point apart in the Xbox One Teams Championship at this point. So that's going to be interesting as the second half of the season gets underway. Now, PC GT1. For the PC race, I was actually racing in this one. I'll explain more about that when we get to the GT3 perspective, but I didn't think to get somebody else to get some camera shots. So we don't have any spectator shots for this round. I apologise for that, but hopefully I'm pretty sure I can tell the story well enough without it. It's just a nice addition, you know, to have those side-by-side spectator shots. Now, it was really great close racing in GT1 on PC in the early stages, as you're seeing. Basically a 5 or 6 way car fight over the lead of the race in the first couple of laps, as we were seeing it on the screen, how close these guys are all running. Really good racing, really high levels of control on the cars. Just doing very, very well. And now Cleo manages to get an overtake on Mindless Riff later on into the race in a couple of laps time, as we'll see, and basically doesn't look back. So these races tend to, if you've just got one quick guy who, you know, it all comes together, they're able to get into the lead early on, and then it just all comes together, they put it together and they don't have any pressure, and they lead from the front. And that's what Cleo did. That's what we've seen from other drivers this round and previous rounds as well. So Cleo gets the overtake on Mindless Riff, as we see Darnock also getting the overtake on Cloud for 3rd place. And then later on into the race, Darnock is also able to catch up and pass Mindless Riff. We'll see how that happens as well. So that's pretty much how it finished. You know, it was a pretty static top 3 after the early stages of the race. Once the top 3 had got their positions, there wasn't much change beyond that. So Cleo got the win with Mindless Riff in second, Darnock in second place, and Mindless Riff in 3rd. The Mindless Riff and Darnock were never too far away from each other. I was, like I said, racing around in this race, and you know they were kept coming past, and there was never that much of a distance between them. But ultimately, the positions didn't change, and Darnock was able to take that second place, with Cleo taking the win. Now, coming on to the PC GT2 race, it was a really interesting one because it was really, really close towards the end, as we'll see. But at the very start, we have Benimi in the top left getting a great start from pole position. Obviously, all the U-Tool cars were starting on pole position for this round. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind that he doesn't get involved with. And he's able to get a decent gap from that. And the reason that there's a lot of stuff going on behind is that Kuntash, who was a reserve driver for this round, was experiencing some really, really bad lag and frame drops and things like that. And the other drivers, as you can see on some of their screens, from Ducati Doctor there, for example, and other aspects, it was causing a significant problem. Kuntash was in second place, started behind Benimi, and that meant that basically, as Benimi was driving off, all of the other cars, all of the other drivers were dropping back as they kept getting in incidents with this laggy driver. Now, Countach does pull over and stop racing once it's communicated and realised that he's having such a laggy race and causing issues for other drivers, but that still made it very mixed up in the early stages, as we're seeing. Lots of different changes for position, lots of action going on. CT Ski, I think I'm saying that right, it might be Ski, I don't know. Our bottom left driver, Ski, did get up into second place, but then again gets taken out by the laggy Countach. And he's the new Globe Oil driver for GT2 PC. So this is his first race in the championship. He's permanent replacement for that team. Just so you know where he came from, because he obviously wasn't in the videos previously. So in the end, Odan is able to get ahead of the pack that we just saw and start catching up to Benimi, and they have a little battle over the lead of the race. Odan then comes in and makes a pit stop and is able to overhaul Benimi as Benimi starts to fade a little bit and drops down to 5th place, I believe, because this is what we're seeing on the screen now is the fight over 3rd place between Danny and Mountain Jed. These two fighting over 3rd place, and ultimately Danny gets that final podium position. But then Odan and Ski, I'm gonna make sure I get that right for next round. This is the final lap of the race, and this is how close they are coming onto this final lap for the lead as well. So it seems like these two were basically able to pull away from the rest, and they had the pace on everybody else, but they were so closely matched. And coming around the final few corners of the final lap of the race, this is how close it was. Ultimately, Odan does get the victory here with Sitski in 2nd place, which isn't a bad position for his first race in the MCEC. Now moving on to PC GT3, this is where I was racing. So my teammate Beta One Hit, or I guess my multi-platform teammate Beta One Hit, the Ron Racing driver for PC GT3, wasn't able to make this round. And ever since the start of the championship, I wanted to do a round in GT3 and in GT1. I was thinking I would do an Xbox One GT1 race and a PC GT3 race to sort of similar to what I did for Season 3 back in 2016. But that is how long it's been since I've done a race in GT3. It's been quite a while, 2016 was the last GT3 race I ever did. Since then I've just been doing GT2 all the time. So it was interesting to have a different aspect. I was starting in 4th place technically, but 2nd place on the grid wasn't the race. So I got a good start and got up into 2nd place early on. And then on lap 3, I'm able to take advantage of some of the GT1s coming through and get up into the lead. And that's pretty much all I saw for quite a while. And I was just, I came into this race with not too much practice on purpose, because I didn't want to, I was really focusing on the GT2 side of things for PS4. I'd done a few laps in the Asea, but not really. And I didn't want to put a load of, practice in. And I was just looking to have a bit of fun in a GT3 race. But it quickly became apparent that Berserker 3, the winner of the previous round, was definitely quicker than me. I obviously started to get quicker as the race went on, and I drove the car more and got used to the track. But Berserker is able to get up into 2nd place by overtaking Zeppi just as I did, and then he follows me for a few laps until he ends up making a mistake, which costs him a lot of time. It's a mistake that we've seen a few times now in this video, basically, dropping off the bottom of the banking. But he does have the speed in this race, so about an hour into the race, he's caught up to me again. Once all the pit stops have filtered out, at least the first few pit stops, this is the 2nd pit stop that we're seeing here from Berserker. He comes, he's right behind me. He comes in, and then the very next lap, I decide that I should come in as well, because I need to be able to defend effectively from him, and the battle essentially resumes. So, he's quicker than me. So throughout the course of basically the last half an hour of the race, I'm just defending my little heart out. That's all I'm doing. I think I really only held onto the lead for so long because I had pretty good traffic management. My pace by the end of the race wasn't too bad over the single lap, but I was being at least relatively consistent with traffic and just not making mistakes. Obviously, as we saw, Berserker got caught up with a bit of traffic, and then I get caught up with a bit of traffic, so then the battle resumes again, and this is all coming into the closing stages of the race. Now we're picking up the battle here basically on the penultimate lap, and it's this is how it's so close. Berserker ends up hitting me in the back a little bit after I go wide in this corner and make a little mistake, and it's a little bit not that great, and he's able to get the run on me and take over the lead of the race coming into the final lap. And obviously, after holding on to the lead for so long, that wasn't great. So I end up making probably one of the best moves I've made in the MCEC to carry the speed around the outside and take the lead back. But then Berserker gets another good run on me coming out of the next few corners, and I should have defended a bit earlier, but I actually didn't expect him to put it down the inside quite as aggressively as that, and it works out for him absolutely beautifully, and he takes the lead of the race over again for the final few corners of the final lap. And this is how it ends, the final corners of the final lap. I lose the lead, get the lead back, and then lose it again. And I guess by the end of the race, I was just kind of like, this is it. If it's not going to happen, if I'm not going to get an MCEC win now, it's not going to happen this season at all. And that's pretty much how I was left. But it was a great battle, and I wasn't expecting to do even that well. So it was really fun to do a GT3 race on PC. Also, Jay Santos came home in third position in that race to get his first podium of the season as well. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over this. Obviously, this is PC round 1, which is happening after round 4. So we had round 4 for PC happen on the Saturday, as it normally does. That's PC races happen on Saturdays, and then on the Sunday, all the PC guys got together again to do the rerun of round 1 of the championship, because we couldn't get it done when it was meant to be done because Rockstar servers wouldn't allow it. What happens, I'm just going to go through this really quickly. I have put up, obviously, in the live playlist and stuff like that, you can watch the video where it shows the perspectives of all the GTs, and you can see how the races unfolded in full. But Darnock got away from second place very well and got into the lead and never looked back. Mindless Riff and Cleo got up into second and third places, and Cleo was able to overhaul Mindless Riff for second, and isn't too far away at the very end of the race actually from Darnock. So it was Darnock in first, Cleo in second, and Mindless Riff taking third place. It's basically, those seem to be the top 3 for PC GT1, and it'll be interesting to see how the second half of the season goes. GT2, it was Sitski. Is it Sitski? Is it CT ski? I don't know, man. I'm going to say Sitski, but I'll make sure I'm right for next round. He can correct me. But yeah, Sitski doesn't have too great of a start, as we're seeing, but is able to gradually work his way through the field. He's got some really good pace. And then Mountain Jed, who started from second place and was having a good race from the front. There was basically a lot of action going on in GT2, which allowed Mountain Jed to get a big lead, but then he gets caught up with a GT3 car there, and that gives Sitski the victory. And then coming on to the final lap of the race, Danny Annie and O'Dan are this close over second place, with Mountain Jed basically just behind them as well. So it was a 3-way fight over second place coming into the final few corners of the final lap. Really, really close. Danny Annie is able to get that final, that second place, with O'Dan taking the final podium spot, and Mountain Jed finishing in fourth place, which was a bit of a shame because he really did get taken out pretty badly by that GT3 car, and if that hadn't have happened, he probably would have had a better result from it, maybe second, and we would have seen what the battle would have happened with him and Sitski as well. Now, PC GT3, as we're coming on to it, the Beta 1 hit was back for this round. Obviously, that's who I was reserving for in the race that we just saw in round 4. He gets a really, really good start and basically is up into first place from, I think it's 6th on the grid for the for Ron in round 1 of the championship. So a great start from him, gets up into first place. Berserker has an absolute nightmare in the first corner and is down to last. But then after quite a way through the race, as you see, lap 8 out of 28, and these are long laps, so we're about half an hour into the race. Berserker has managed to catch up a little bit to Beta 1 hit, who then unfortunately makes a mistake and gives Berserker his third win of the season out of 4 rounds that we've had. So Berserker takes the victory, Beta 1 hit returns to finish in second place, and in third place we had Large Soda, who was getting his second podium of the season as well. So the PC Championships, this is after all the 4 rounds have been done. Darnock is 10 points ahead of Mindless Riff with Cleo in third. Odan is a decent gap, 10 points ahead of Danny, but again, dropped scores and things like that are all going to come into play later on through the season. And then Berserker has a pretty good lead at the moment with only 3 points dropped from a full point score for GT3. So this is halfway through the season. We've also got only 6 points separating the top 4 teams in the PC Teams Championship, which is pretty crazy. And it's nice that we've now got round 1 of PC done so that all of these points are, accurate, and we can go into the second half of the championship with no races still to run, basically. The overall teams championship, we've got Preservex and Ron at the very top, separated by 2 points, and Globo 24/7 not too far behind in third and fourth places as well. Interestingly, at this halfway stage, Preservex and Ron, those are the 2 teams that were fighting for the teams championship and were separated by 1 point at the end of the teams championship on Xbox 360 back in season 1. So it's really interesting that those are the 2 same teams that are now at the top of the overall teams championship halfway into the season, but there's still a long way to go. There's still another 4 races to go, and it could all change. So that's pretty much it for round 4 of the Multi-Class Endurance Championship season 5, and a little bit of PC round 1 as well. You can either keep up with the championship live each weekend on Twitch, or just wait until the next episode of these highlight videos. And as I said, you can also watch the full uninterrupted coverage from each of these races with spectating and commentary for Xbox One and PC, plus my race alongside the footage from other drivers for PS4 with the live stream videos as well. All of the links for those, as well as any other info that you may need about the championship, can be found down below in the video description and pinned comment. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.